Welcome to a new world of gods and monsters. Welcome to another movie face off, this time more horror movies. Now, after I did one with the two famous Dracula movies, the Bela Lugosi one and the 1992 one, I decided to do one with Frankenstein because even though he hasn't had as many movies made about him, he has been in the cinema game longer than Dracula since 1910. So I figured I might as well do it. But in looking for a good contender to go up against the 1931 film, I was looking through some of the more modern films. I'm just like, the only two that are actually modern are the 1994 version and another movie that was released a few years ago, Victor Frankenstein, none of which are actually good enough for this. That's when I realized the only good contender for the 1931 film is its sequel, the 1935 film, Bride of Frankenstein. So, we've got 5 rounds here, and it's the original versus the sequel, the first, well, probably first horror sequel of the genre, one that changed horror itself. So, let's get right down into it. Round 1, story. Now, technically, both of these films are based off the Mary Shelley novel. The first one more of the actual main plot, while the second one's focused on more of a subplot. But we're not going to be looking forward to how closely it resembles the book. Now, we're just going to be judging these stories just based on the kinds of stories they are and how well it's shown. So in the first one, Frankenstein, we see, of course, Dr. Henry Frankenstein, not Victor Frankenstein. That's right, his real name's Henry. Get used to it. And his hunchback assistant, Fitz, or is it Fritz? Fitz. Ah, goddamn. It's Fritz. Yes. And guess what? The hunchback assistant's name is not what you thought either. Huh. Crazy how that works. Now they start off searching for body parts, and of course Elizabeth and a friend, Victor, who is going to be the best man at Elizabeth and Henry Frankenstein's wedding, show up along with Dr. Wallet. Yeah, Dr. Wallet. Dr. Wallet? God, how can I not get these names right? Literally just Waldman. They're here trying to figure out what the heck Frankenstein is doing. He creates life with using a dead body, and of course, the monster gets a little bit out of control, and he is hunted down by the people, and is subsequently ends in the fire. Now the sequel the sequel starts right where the first one ends, as Henry Frankenstein is reacquainted with a mentor, Patronus. Let's just call him the mentor. He's reacquainted with his mentor, who wants Henry to help him make a mate for for the monster. And of course, we get the mate, but it does not go quite as planned. Now, the story of the 1931 film is just iconic. It's known throughout all of popular culture, horror culture, and all that. So I'm going to give this one to Frankenstein. Now, Bride of Frankenstein had a good story as well, but the first one is just a lot more familiar, iconic, and it's probably just a tad more well directed. Now let's go into the second round. Cast. Now the cast for both these movies, it changes for the most part, but they focus on the key players, Henry Frankenstein, his wife Elizabeth, the monster. They stayed the same in both of these movies, and all the other supporting roles are really well done as well. But if I'm going to have to pick one I'm going to have to probably give this to Bride of Frankenstein, and there are two new people in Bride of Frankenstein that help determine this. One, the old blind hermit, with where we actually get to like connect with the monster through him, and it just gives such an emotional performance, and it's just really grabs the viewer and brings them in. And of course, we have Bride of Frankenstein as the other character that wins this round, because even though she was only on screen for like I think literally 5 minutes, the last 5 minutes, her image is so ingrained with the mythology of Frankenstein that it is impressive. So, I mean, she's been seen in in various other versions of the Frankenstein story in books, some TV shows, all that stuff. So, with an impressive impression like that, this round goes to Bride of Frankenstein. Now, let's get into the effects and action. Now, the effects and action, both these movies aren't really that impressive. I mean, we got 1931, 1935, so there's really not much that changed. However, Bride of Frankenstein does have does have one particular scene, particularly when Frankenstein's mentor shows him some of his like little mini creations he's been doing with like small people, and the effects for that are actually pretty well done in certain time period and such. And there is a lot more action, like the chase scenes and showing off the monster's strength and all that. Whereas in the original film, like we get an idea of how strong he is, but there really isn't a lot of like action that like showcases the like what the story is trying to get across. So this one goes to Bride of Frankenstein as well. Now let's get into the two rounds that are really important here. The first is atmosphere. Now the 1931 film, which is based off the book, is a horror story. One about how man messes with science, tries to play God, and he gets what he wants, but it just does not turn out the way he wants to. Now the atmosphere in Bride of Frankenstein, it's similar for the most part. In the beginning, we have a like sort of like a conversation going on between Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, and Mary Shelley. Yeah, that's right, Mary Shelley, as in the author of Frankenstein. Well, not actually her, but an actress playing her. And they're having a conversation, and Mary Shelley just goes into the story that is Bride of Frankenstein. So that's a little too meta for my taste for this kind of movie. But there are also a couple other scenes that that show that this is a very similar atmosphere to the original, such as with the old blind hermit who has been praying to God for a friend, and then the monster comes. It's surprisingly emotional. It actually kind of got me a little teary-eyed a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. And that's just very impressive, especially for a sequel. And of course, even though The Bride of Frankenstein was only on for a short bit, her time on that screen just really showed the dark turn that the story has become. But throughout the majority of Bride of Frankenstein, just wasn't as the atmosphere just wasn't as strong as the original, which was a classic horror, don't meddle with science and try to be God kind of story. So as for atmosphere goes, it goes to Frankenstein. So 2-2 tie. Let's get into the final round here, which is legacy. Both of these films have powerful legacies. The 1931 original, of course, has the legacy of being one of the kickstarters of the golden age of horror, which is based off of a novel that is just as influential in the literature world, and there are multiple different takes and versions and other sort of like stories in other media, including movies, TV, comics, all that sort of stuff. While Bride of Frankenstein has a little bit of a different legacy, but still just as powerful. I mean, this is probably the first horror sequel ever, and it completely changed the genre. I mean, creating a sequel to it was just, it was a little bit unthinkable at the time. In fact, the director of Bride of Frankenstein, who was also the director of the 1931 Frankenstein, tried everything in his power to make sure this film was not made because he did not think it was going to be a good film. But after some time of his efforts and attempts, he started to realize that this script, this story that he was about to do was actually very good. And to have a director be against his own project but then turn around to realize how great it actually is sort of an amazing story that's unheard of. So thinking about it, I'm gonna have to give this one to Bride of Frankenstein because if it had tanked, who knows what the horror genre or would look like, and who knows what other movies would look like that have sequels after it. I mean, Bride of Frankenstein shows that not only could sequels really be like that, could be profitable, it could be really great films as well. And that's very impressive considering how much the director originally did not want to do it. So, a score of 3-2, Bride of Frankenstein beats out its predecessor. So, these are very classic movies. And I know they're really old movies, like from the 30s, and they're black and white, and they're short. Like, the 1931 film was like an hour 10, the sequel was an hour 15. But you really need to check them out. It's classic, golden age cinema making. It's just something that you should really take the time to watch because you'll be surprised by how much you're invested in these movies. Well, that's it for this movie Face Off. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Dr. Cinema. I'm going to go resurrect a dead body now.